Wow, two podcast episodes within a span of 2 days. That's crazy. So anyway, this is a film review of Eventyrland, or It's Only Make Believe as it's called in the United States. It was released in 2013, directed by Errol Austin Amundsen. I may have mispronounced that name, but that's the director. To the best of my ability to pronounce it. And of course, when I do these reviews, I try to be, you know, as neutral as possible. I try to not be a snob. I'm trying to be no better than the proverbial man on the street. And as you know, in almost every case, the man in the street is always right. He always knows best. And of course, that would apply to my review here. So this is a Norwegian film, in case you didn't guess. If you see names like that, it's probably Norwegian or something like that. So the official synopsis and plot: Jenny is a woman that has just gotten out after serving a sentence in prison. Her dream is to build a home for herself and her daughter. It becomes difficult when the past threatens to catch up with her. The difficult choices that will decide absolutely everything force themselves on her and require drastic action from Jenny. This is a story about a murder that should never have happened, about friends one should never trust, and about a debt that only increases with each installment. It is an existence in which Jenny has lost everything, but she still has everything to gain: her daughter. So that's a fairly decent description of the movie. It doesn't give away too much. And my thoughts on the movie is that it was pretty good. I hesitate to recommend a movie like this because it's probably not going to knock the average person's socks off. But if you have a chance to check it out, you might want to give it a try. It's available right now on Tubi TV. That's Tubi TV, where they have a bunch of free movies. So basically, the bad guys in this movie are the kind of people you might randomly walk past every day, maybe on your way home from the pub or something like that. Like, if I don't know, if you drink, you might see these people in the bar. They're kind of like low lives, but they don't necessarily come across as obvious supervillain types or something like that. They're just like involved in the drug trade or something, but you might see them, in a laundromat or something. And the story is tragic, and it's a it's about the passage of time as well. Somebody who was sent to prison and is trying to put their life back together, and make amends with her daughter or something. And what's kind of refreshing about this movie, in a way, is that the mother-daughter relationship doesn't seem that strained. So it's not quite like The Wrestler, and that that was like one of the main forms of tension in that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but you know a big part of that is a wrestler who's trying to reconnect with his daughter, who he basically overlooked for much of his life, and he basically is like a failure. Well, and this character, she is a failure of a certain type, but there is a sense that maybe she could get her life back on track. But then these people from her past come back and kind of mess her up, and they abuse her and stuff like that, and they basically try to get her back involved in some criminal activities and stuff like that. And one of my thoughts watching this movie is that, as an American, it's important for me to be reminded that, oh yeah, even places like uh, Norway have occasional violent crime and gangs and stuff like that. And it kind of is a dumb thing for me to say, But sometimes I just got so used to headlines about the United States having problems with violence that occasionally it's important to remember that people in Europe have these kinds of issues as well, and even small town America, a place like where I live and grew up, and occasionally has violent incidents too. So it's not always just a major city thing. And of course, you can have small time gangs that create problems, and this is obviously a story that kind of ties into that. Like I said, I don't think it's meant to be a story about like a big time gangster who's like you know d- dominant in the country of Norway or something. Like I don't think it's a major gang figure. It's just like kind of a small town kind of gangster, or something like that. That's my impression of it. And they don't always make big headlines, but these kinds of criminal elements, they do exist out there. They happen. And if you're sitting on a federal grand jury, these are the types of people you might end up putting away or something like that. And so the movie stars, I didn't even talk about that yet. I guess that's how scatterbrained this review kind of is. But the main star who plays Jenny is Silja Salmonson. And I had to look up how to pronounce that first name because it's spelled Silje, and it turns out that's Celia. And then you have the daughter whose name is Marit or Merit or something like that. She's played by Iben Austin Gel. I think that's how it's pronounced, something like that. I guess she was only in this one movie, oddly enough. So, I guess that was a one and done type of scenario for her. But she does a good job. So does Celia, and I have to say that as far as like the acting performances go, there aren't really that many memorable performances. But it's actually not the type of movie that I would say requires somebody to completely take over the movie. Like it seems like the storyline is shared by all of the actors and all of the characters. So I don't think anyone truly dominates like a Robert De Niro type of performance or something like that. Not every movie really requires that in order for it to sort of captivate. Well, captivate isn't the right word, but appeal to an audience. And anyway, you also have Thomas Alf Larson as Gary. So his performance is not very memorable, but he does appear in the movie. He's like one of the main characters. And really, as far as like the villainous characters go, I think the most impressive performance was probably a guy who calls himself Eddie Vedder. So yeah, I mean there's a character named Eddie Vedder in here. I think it's just a name that he makes up for himself as sort of a joke, because obviously that's the name of the lead singer of Pearl Jam. But anyway, that actor's name who plays Eddie Vedder is Egil Egil Birkland or something like that. And he's definitely a more memorable character. He's a scumbag of sorts, and probably more dangerous because a person might underestimate him. That's one of the funny kind of villains that is sort of, I would say, underutilized in storylines. The person who kind of could rise to the top because others underestimate him. So that's really my assessment of that character. To me, he was actually one of the more memorable characters in the movie. I wouldn't say that this movie will be the wildest trip you've ever went on or anything like that. And in fact, Jenny's decisions are often poorly planned and executed, which might be a source of frustration if you're watching it. It's sort of like a horror movie. You're like, why did this person make this dumb decision? And you might put yourself in their choose and say, well, I would have done things way differently from this main character, or maybe a side character or whatever. But the movie never exactly makes her out to be a genius or an action hero anyway. So in that sense, I suppose it's a realistic depiction of someone who is simply in over their head, and if they do come out on top, it's probably by sheer coincidence, as opposed to being some sort of Jane Rambo uh, transformation or something like that. It's also realistic that she hesitates to turn to the police for help, or neighbors or friends or whatever, because she doesn't want to further endanger her daughter, and she possibly does not trust any outcomes unless she is the one facing her problems alone. So there's sort of the idea that I'm I'm in this alone. I have to solve this myself. So I think that's partly what's driving the character to make the decisions that she does. And she doesn't come up with a plan to eliminate the threat against her and her daughter. That she doesn't come up with a brilliant plan. Um, Unbeknownst to her, she also doesn't quite have the courage or the skill to carry out her flaws, or I mean, her plans flawlessly. So it's really a realistic movie as far as I'm concerned when it comes to how things play out. It seems like something you might actually read about in your newspaper or whatever. Might be a scenario that some people out there could face hypothetically. Hopefully you don't, but it's a fact that we're not all action heroes. If we're in some high stress situation, we might make some lousy decisions, and we might chicken out. We might become cowards. Um, I guess that's really one of the key points of this movie, and it's also a reminder that when pressed, you know, we can easily flounder, even if we're generally courageous. Like we just might be having an off day. You know what I mean? And our plans might not work out. Our attitudes might change, and all sorts of things could go wrong in whatever sort of plans that we have. Jenny really is not a natural born hero or a leader, and that's one reason some people probably won't appreciate this movie. It's not really an entertaining film exactly, like I mentioned, Rambo or something like that. In so many movies, we get sort of a natural born badass character, and this movie is one of those that challenges that notion a little bit. So it's probably not tailor made for audiences who hunger for more action movie stars and sort of Hollywood endings. Although, even in stories like this, there could be a happy ending. So that's my half-assed review. Hopefully, this might make you interested in seeing this movie. I hesitate to say you're gonna love it because you might not. You might not like this one, but um, you might want to give it a shot. Give it a try. It might, you know, be something that you'll enjoy. And I'm losing my voice. God damn it. Anyway, have a good day.